Hello, I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content at TelecomTV, and I'm joined today by Kaniz Mahdi, who is VMware's Vice President of Distributed Edge. Hello Kaniz, very good to meet you and thanks for joining us on the programme. Now, I know you spend a good amount of time thinking about the nextG, the evolution and adoption of 5G and research into 6G and beyond. So what do you see as the main barriers today that might slow down 5G innovation?
Hi Guy, nice to be with you. Talking about nextG, it all starts with 5G, of course. And when you look at the current state of 5G, we have done extremely well when it comes to the areas that are intimate with 3GPP driven technology focus areas. Talk about massive broadband, although millimeter wave is still pretty much work in progress. But we're doing fairly well and surprisingly well in the adoption of cloud native with 5G SA coming along. 5G was meant to be such a revolutionary generation of wireless that it's going to take a while before we are able to confidently say that we have fulfilled the promise of 5G. And the areas where I see the most, need for more work is around time-sensitive communications, the areas which sit at the intersection of the wireless and internet and cloud. Some people call it the edge. I try not to use the term edge per se because it's a very loosely defined term. A lot of work needs to be done in that area. And the fact is that 5G by itself may not have been such a big complex challenge, but then when you complement 5G with the other advances taking place, specifically in the AI space, 5G distribution of compute, AI distribution of compute, distribution of data, it's basically pulling the center of gravity of the internet away from where it is today, closer to the user. The edge is increasingly becoming heterogeneous and distributed, and it's this distributed nature or the fungible nature of the edge which is quite foreign to the entities which run and manage the internet, and that's where I see most of the challenges.
And based on your research, what changes should CSPs make as they evolve their networks and infrastructure towards a faster rollout of 5G and a simpler adoption of 6G?
So a CSP have been doing quite a big transformation. They've gone through tremendous transformation since the early days of SDN and NFV, and it's a long journey. It all started with the introduction of SDN, and then network function virtualization came along, and now we are on to the cloud native evolution of the network functions toward cloud native applications. All good. I think the next big challenge that really needs to be addressed, specifically in the space that some call last mile, some call far edge, is distribution of compute and connecting compute in a seamless manner, such that the applications remain truly distributed, but still they function as a whole. So the segregation and distribution of network functions, where they are virtualized or cloud native, remains quite a big undertaking. And I think with the rollout of 5G SA coming to fruition, I think we will be able to uncover the deployment and operational challenges there, and we will be able to overcome those. Then with programmability also comes the possibility of new threat vectors. Security was something that was an afterthought in 5G, and taking this next step in the evolution of 5G towards 6G, we would really like security to be the front and center when we look into nextG, which is the next chapter of 5G or even 6G. Resiliency, we all have gone through a fundamental shift in the way we live, work, and play. Pandemic basically caused a massive distribution of assets and technology functions that used to reside in well secured, protected DMCs. Now they're all distributed, so resiliency becomes front and center. Then the next big challenge that I see, and this is a challenge that we've been trying to address for the past 10 years or so, is the data itself. So any new generation of wireless, be it 5G or evolution of 5G to whatever it becomes, or 6G, will be very, very heavily reliant on data. And the industry has done tremendous progress, made tremendous progress in using AI for betterment of many workflows that circle around us. However, when you look at the state of the art in the telecommunications network, data still remains to be a very big unknown. There needs to be mechanisms to be able to lift the telemetry, drive insights from the telemetry, and use those insights to drive automation. I think that is, in my opinion, one of the biggest challenges, that once we have gone through the deployment cycle of distributing the network functions, it's imperative that we start taking a serious look at how we make use of the enormous amounts of data that is hidden in the telecommunications network to automate telecom systems, as well as use that data for the betterment of the applications and the people that they serve.
Now, the current vision of 6G envisions ever more ubiquitous and faster networks with near-universal connectivity and immersive experiences becoming an integral part of our lives. So how would such an evolution affect CSPs, and what do you recommend they do to prepare?
It's funny you say that, because I was on the drawing board when we were thinking the roadmap for 5G 10 years ago. And I have to tell you, that was the vision that you described: fully autonomous, fully ubiquitous, pervasive connectivity. To me, that is 5G. 5G was meant to be the first generation of wireless that made connectivity as commonplace as any utility. We've made, as I alluded to earlier, tremendous progress in making connectivity as pervasive as possible, but making it as commonplace as a utility, there is a tremendous amount of effort that is needed. A bit of a paradigm shift, I should say, in the way systems are designed, planned, and operated. Basically, if you look at 6G, it's not going to be an incremental upgrade of wireless or the cloud or the internet. It's the fusion of all three for reimagination of life, and a reimagination of life that is underpinned by planet-scale automation. Planet-scale automation that focuses on humanity, automates day-to-day experiences, enables collaboration, interactive collaborations across biological, digital, and physical systems. By the way, that was also one of the key tenets of 5G. I hope that once we are marching towards 6G, along the way we end up completing that 5G ambition. And then 6G must be resilient, autonomic, secure, and adaptive. So what does the CSP need to do to help them prepare for that vision of 6G? I think the communication systems of today, the internet, the mobile network, any communication connectivity pipe that you see, it's merely meant and is built for communications as a communication vehicle. What is needed is a living, breathing foundation for automating life. And a living, breathing foundation of automating life can only be built, in my opinion, if we were to take inspiration from the nature. What we need is a circulatory system that pulls together all the infrastructure across the globe. And I'm not saying go ahead and ditch the infrastructure that is present today. That's not the ambition. Take the connectivity infrastructure put together by the CSPs, by the telco cloud providers, by the cloud service providers, and the colo facilities and the fiber companies which provide the on-ramp into the cloud. Stitch them together into a circulatory system that basically becomes the fueling entity for this foundation. And then once the circulatory system is in place, the next step would be to stitch a nervous system to fully automate the circulatory system, enabling the communications networks. This basically I will walk you through in a bit on some of the initiatives which we are driving. So basically the resulting construct, once you are able to stitch multiple circulatory systems into one common global scale, hopefully planet scale, because it's not just about terrestrial networks anymore. We have to go beyond into non-terrestrial space. Once you have this fabric of fabrics is in place, we call this fabric of fabrics the grid, then basically you will have this living, breathing foundation for enabling human life experiences that are for the good of humanity. And that basically is the start of a new way of living and working and going about doing our business, which is going to be automated, it's going to be adaptive, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
And can you share with us any promising network and communications initiatives and projects that you believe will have an impact on us in the coming years?
One of the key ambitions for the OGA was to augment the evolution of the radio with bringing in the cloud and the enterprise sectors, creating a breeding ground for 6G. So traditional holes that, if you look at historically from 3G to 4G to 5G, traditional holes that the evolution of the radio goes simultaneously in parallel with the evolution of the application. These are two independent streams that are evolving next to each other, but then they are not coordinating with each other, right? So think of 3G. 3G was introduced in the early 90s. It was not until the late 90s with the introduction of the App Store that 3G was fully realized. And by that time, LTE was already in the labs. Back then, when we were writing the standards for LTE, we would not have imagined about Uber. And so LTE was rolled out, many years pass, and then Uber comes up, and Uber ends up being the biggest beneficiary of LTE. So it's basically, traditionally, what we've seen is the radio goes out. It's not a one and done thing. The application ecosystem evolves, develops on top of the radio, and then it takes about 4 to 5 years of maturity of the radio markets and then application ecosystem evolving. And then basically you are able to say that, yes, I was able to complete the original promise of this generation of wireless. We would like to change that. We would like to change that for 6G. And we are doing that with the OGA. So with OGA, we are working with the cloud service providers, with the telecommunication service providers, as well as the radio researchers and thinkers to enable a breeding ground. And I'm really literally talking about a brick and mortar breeding ground, which will be basically an innovation grid, planet scale, global scale initially, that we are standing up, that will enable innovation, or we call it co-innovation because it's mostly academia, multiple industries coming together, working together on evolution of multiple technologies that that eventually will lead into 6G. So that's OGA. Along the same themes, we are also working with the 3GPP community in helping them drive the roadmap of 6G in the traditional wheelhouses of 3GPP in a way that those roadmaps are augmented or complemented by the evolution of the cloud, the application, and the enterprise. And those two initiatives that we are spearheading is at this nextG Alliance, which is basically a North American initiative for 6G that is taking a life cycle approach for the definition of the 6G roadmap. And what is even more interesting is the partnership that we have forged with NSF on RINGS. RINGS stand for Resilient Intelligent NextG Systems. It started out with a standard wireless evolution research NSF gig. But fortunately, we were approached by NSF to help them expand the scope of RINGS into a multi-sector initiative. And now it has participants from the upper echelons of wireless as well as the cloud, creating a very unique roadmap, a unique research roadmap for the 6G space, which is, of course, it includes the evolution of the radio toward terahertz. But the main ambition with RINGS is to create and enable resilient societies through resilient, intelligent, next generation systems that span the entire user to cloud or edge to cloud continuum. And I'm very, very proud of the work that we have done in RINGS. It's a historic PPP, the biggest in the history of NSF. And RINGS, OGA, and NGA are only the starting point. The future is bright. And we are VMware, we find ourselves right at a sweet spot to be helping these three industries, the cloud, the wireless, and the internet, evolve themselves towards future, a future which involves the humanity along with itself, and it's centered around the humanity, in fact. So that's basically a very quick summary of the initiatives that we're driving towards 6G.
And how would all this affect CSPs, with their ongoing evolution? What would you recommend they do to prepare for the coming 6G?
I think the CSP is sitting on a very nice asset, which is the last mile. CSPs are the only ones who understand how to operate and manage and run the last mile, be it the wireless spectrum or the wireline broadband or just simple fiber going all the way to the user prems, and these user prems could be homes or the industries or whatnot. I think the space of the edge or the last mile or whatever you call it, that is the space that needs to be developed so that the circulatory system that I alluded to earlier is a robust circulatory system in place that enables it creates the breeding ground, I should say, for the future applications. The CSPs basically are sitting on the assets, the fiber, the operations gear to run and manage the fiber, as well as the the nervous system that stitches a multitude of these compute locations in a way that we are basically the construct of a data center evolves toward from a physical static construct sitting in a national or international hyperscaler domain to becoming part and parcel of the daily lives, right? And there needs to be a function that stitches these multiple compute locations in a homogeneous pool of resources and turning it into a logical, fungible data center, a data center without borders. And this data center without borders is a fundament that I don't see can be tackled or managed by one single type of service providers. Of course, you will need the expertise of the cloud service providers who know how to manage and run and operate the compute. But then you also are very heavily relying on the operational and management aspects of the connectivity and the nervous system that stitches these thousands, if not millions, of compute locations. So the future is basically going to be a very strong, tight, close collaboration between the CSP. And the C in the CSP could be the communication service provider or the cloud service provider.
Absolutely fascinating. Kaniz, many thanks indeed for joining us today and sharing your views on the evolution of 5G and the vision for 6G. Thank you.